The world keeps doing what it does. The difficult person, the outcome you cannot control, the circumstance that arrived without your permission and will not leave without a fight. And somewhere in the middle of it, you lose the thread of yourself. The calm you had in the morning is gone by noon. The person you intended to be in that conversation is not the person who showed up. You react when you meant to respond. You are moved when you meant to be steady. What you were looking for is not the elimination of difficulty. It is a place inside yourself that difficulty cannot reach, a room that stays intact regardless of what is happening outside it. Marcus Aurelius built that room. He called it the inner citadel. He built it under conditions that would have broken most people, commanding armies on the Danube frontier, managing a senate that required constant political navigation, watching his children die, governing an empire of 60 million people while a plague killed 5 million of them. He built it not in retreat from the world, but in the middle of it. And he described in the private journal that became the Meditations exactly how it is done. The Meditations were never meant to be published. Marcus wrote them for himself, in Greek, in the military camps on the northern frontier, in the palace in Rome, as a daily practice of returning to the philosophy that he had been studying since he was a young man and that he kept needing to relearn. This is the first thing to know about him. He was not a Stoic sage who had arrived at tranquility. He was a person in constant, humble, daily struggle with the same failures of attention and equanimity that every thoughtful person recognizes. He wrote things like, "Today I spoke more than I should have. Begin again." He wrote, "Stop arguing about what a good person is and just be one." He wrote to himself repeatedly with the specific patience of a person who knows exactly what the ideal is and knows exactly how often he falls short of it and keeps trying anyway. The Meditations are not the record of a man who had mastered the inner citadel. They are the record of a man building it, one entry at a time, one returning from distraction at a time, across the full span of a reign that gave him every reason to abandon the project. Marcus Aurelius was born in 121 AD in Rome to a family of Spanish origin that had risen to the highest levels of Roman aristocracy. His father died when he was 3. He was raised by his grandfather and educated with a care that the Emperor Hadrian noticed. Hadrian selected him at the age of 17 as a future emperor, engineering the adoption that would eventually place him on the throne. He did not want the throne. This is well documented and entirely credible. He had been, since his early teens, drawn to philosophy, specifically to Stoicism, which he encountered first through Epictetus's teachings. He wanted the philosopher's life. He received instead the emperor's. He took the throne in 161 AD, insisting on ruling jointly with his adoptive brother Lucius Verus, an act of constitutional scrupulousness that was entirely unnecessary and entirely characteristic. Almost immediately the frontier wars began, the Parthian War in the east, the Germanic wars in the north, which occupied the last decade of his reign and during which most of the Meditations were written. The Antonine Plague, which arrived with the returning army from the east and which killed between 5 and 10 million people across the empire. He ruled for 19 years. He died in 180 AD on the frontier, probably of the plague, at 58. He was, by the near-universal testimony of his contemporaries and the subsequent centuries, the closest thing to Plato's philosopher king that history has produced. A man of genuine philosophical commitment who happened to be the most powerful person on earth and who spent his entire reign trying to be worthy of the former while navigating the full, crushing weight of the latter.
The Meditations were found among his papers. They were published as a single volume, though they are clearly a series of private notebooks rather than a designed work. They have been in continuous circulation since the first printed edition in 1559. The inner citadel is the Stoic philosopher Pierre Hadot's name for what Marcus is building throughout the Meditations. Marcus himself does not use the phrase, but the concept is everywhere in the text. The idea that within each person there is a ruling faculty, the hegemonikon, the governing intelligence, that is by its nature immune to external compulsion. The body can be harmed, the reputation can be damaged, the circumstances can be terrible, but the ruling faculty, the capacity to judge, to choose, to assign meaning to what is happening, cannot be violated from the outside. It can only be surrendered from the inside. This is the Stoic distinction that Marcus returns to again and again, the distinction between what is up to us and what is not. What is up to us, our judgments, our intentions, our responses, our values. What is not up to us, the actions of other people, the outcomes of events, the physical circumstances of the world. The suffering that the Stoics were addressing, and that Marcus was addressing in himself, in the military camp, in the palace, is almost always the suffering that comes from treating the second category as if it belongs to the first, from needing the outcome to go a certain way, from requiring other people to behave as they should, from making the peace of the inner citadel conditional on the cooperation of a world that will not reliably cooperate. The inner citadel is built by withdrawing the conditions, by training the ruling faculty to maintain its integrity regardless of what the outer circumstances are doing. Not indifference. Marcus was not indifferent to outcomes, not indifferent to the suffering around him. He worked hard, cared deeply, acted on every available means of improving the situation, but he did not make his own stability conditional on the improvement. The peace of the inner room was not a reward for favorable outcomes. It was the baseline, the condition from which he acted, to which he returned, that he kept rebuilding every time the distractions and the reactions and the sheer pressure of his circumstances had eroded it. The meditations are full of the tools he used to do this. The view from above, the practice of mentally zooming out from the present difficulty to the full sweep of history and human life, in which the current crisis is revealed as temporary, the current enemy as forgotten, the current urgency as one small event in a vast and largely indifferent cosmos. Not to produce despair, but to produce proportion, to remember that the thing that is threatening the peace of the inner citadel right now will not be remembered in a century, and to act with full effort and full care on that basis. The present moment focus, the repeated instruction to attend to what is here, not what might come or what has passed. The future is not real. The past is not real. This moment is real, and it is the only moment in which anything can be done or experienced. The anxiety that comes from projecting forward into imagined catastrophes, the regret that comes from rehearsing the past, both are violations of the inner citadel performed not by external forces, but by the mind's own habit of leaving the present. The obstacle is the way, the reframing of difficulty as the material from which virtue is built, rather than the enemy of it. Marcus writes, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." The difficult person is the practice of patience. The unwanted circumstance is the practice of equanimity. The loss is the practice of acceptance. The citadel is not built in comfortable conditions. It is built precisely in the conditions that seem designed to destroy it. And the return, the most repeated instruction in the entire meditations, the one that gives the work its specific, humble, deeply useful character. You will fail. You will lose the thread. You will react when you meant to respond, be moved when you meant to be steady, say the thing you intended not to say. This is not the evidence that the project is impossible. It is the evidence that the project is ongoing. Begin again. Return to the ruling faculty. Return to the principles. The practice is the returning, not the not falling.
Now, the bridge. Because Marcus was the emperor of Rome in the 2nd century AD, and most people watching this video are not. But here is what has not changed. The difficult person is still there. The outcome that refuses to cooperate is still there. The circumstance that arrived without permission and is taking longer than expected to resolve is still there. The morning calm eroded by noon, the intended response replaced by the actual reaction, the gap between the person you mean to be in the hard moment and the person who actually shows up. These are not Roman problems, they are human problems. And the inner citadel Marcus was building in the military camp on the Danube is available to be built anywhere, including where you are. The tools are the same: the view from above, the return to the present moment, the reframing of the obstacle as the material of practice, and the return, the daily, unglamorous, entirely available practice of noticing when you have lost the thread and beginning again without self-condemnation. The citadel is not built in a single meditation. It is built in the accumulation of 10,000 returnings, 10,000 moments of noticing the reaction and choosing the response, 10,000 mornings of beginning again. Marcus had 19 years of the hardest job in the world to build his. You have today. It is enough to begin. Here is what Marcus Aurelius asks of you, practically, today. First, identify your current threat to the inner citadel. Not in general, the specific thing that is most reliably eroding your equanimity right now. The person whose behavior is requiring more of your peace than you intended to give. The outcome you have made your stability conditional on. The circumstance you are treating as a violation of how things should be rather than as the material of practice. Name it with Marcus's precision, not everything is difficult, the specific thing, because the named threat is the thing you can work with. The vague anxiety is just weather. The specific identified condition from which you are currently withdrawing your peace, that is the practice. Second, apply the view from above. Take the thing that is currently threatening the citadel and mentally place it in the full sweep of time. In 10 years, will this matter? In 50? In the century after your death, who will remember this difficulty, this person, this outcome that currently requires so much of your attention? Marcus used this practice not to become indifferent, but to produce proportion. To act with full effort and full care on matters that deserve effort and care, while withdrawing the surplus of anxiety and urgency that the unexamined mind attaches to things that are, in the full sweep of things, small. The practice does not make the difficulty disappear, it makes it its actual size. Third, find the obstacle that is the way. Look at the thing that is standing in the way of what you want, the difficult person, the blocked path, the unwanted circumstance, and ask what virtue it is an opportunity to practice, not what it is preventing, what it is enabling. The person who will not cooperate is the practice of patience. The plan that has failed is the practice of flexibility. The loss is the practice of acceptance. This is not positive thinking, it is the Stoic reframe, the recognition that the outer circumstances do not determine the inner reality, that the citadel is built precisely in the conditions that seem designed to destroy it, and that the material life keeps giving you is exactly the material the practice requires. Fourth, practice the return. This is the most important practice and the most available one. Today, at some point, you will lose the thread. You will react when you meant to respond. The citadel will be temporarily breached. This is not failure, it is the practice presenting itself. The moment you notice, in the conversation, in the hour after, at the end of the day, is the moment the return is available. Not with self-condemnation, which is itself a disturbance of the citadel, with the specific Marcus-grade patience of a person who has read their own failure honestly and decided, begin again. The practice is the returning, not the not falling. That is the whole thing.
not the absence of disturbance, the practiced, patient, daily rebuilding of the room inside yourself that the disturbance keeps testing and that the returning keeps restoring.
I want to close with the image that stays with me when I think about Marcus Aurelius. Not the emperor in the palace, not the general on the frontier. The man at the desk before dawn, the military camp quiet around him, the journal open, writing to himself for no audience, with the specific honesty of a person who knows exactly where he fell short yesterday and is beginning again today. Not performing philosophy, practicing it, in the same way that a musician practices scales, not for the performance, but because the practice is what makes the performance possible. Because the Citadel is not a destination you arrive at, it is something you build every morning, one returning at a time. He was the most powerful person on earth. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Not because everything is fine, because the room inside himself was intact, and from that room, whatever the day required, whatever the empire needed, whatever the plague demanded, whatever loss arrived before nightfall, he could meet it, steadily, with full effort, without requiring the world to be other than it was. That room is available to you. It is being built right now. In every moment you notice the reaction and choose the response instead. In every returning, in every morning you open the journal and begin again. Here is the question Marcus Aurelius leaves us with today. What is currently breaching the inner citadel? Not in general, the specific person, outcome, or circumstance to which you have given the power to determine whether the room inside you stays intact. And what would it mean to withdraw that power today? Not to stop caring, not to stop acting, to stop making the peace of the inner room conditional on the cooperation of what is outside it. Leave that in the comments, because naming it is the first act of the return. And the return, Marcus wrote every morning for 19 years, is the whole practice. I'll see you in the next one.